I'm Ryan Milliken from Hardway Performance, and you're listening to the Diesel Power Podcast.
This is Jaron Holder from Holderdown Performance.
This is Anthony Range from XDP.
I'm Dimitri Miller with No Zone Diesel.
I'm Drew with D&J Precision Machine.
I'm Pinky.
And you're listening to the Diesel Power Podcast.
Diesel Power Podcast.
Diesel Power Podcast.
And you're listening to the Diesel Power Podcast.
The one and only Diesel Power Podcast.
Hello, Diesel fans, and welcome to the official Diesel Power Podcast. This podcast is about a topic that we've wanted to cover for a long time, and that's rolling coal. The New York Times went in depth with an article where they spoke with law enforcement, they spoke with health professionals, diesel enthusiasts, and others about this very topic. And I read the article, and I leaned back in my chair, and I got pissed off. And I wasn't pissed off because the New York Times talked with people and got quotes from them, or offered a view into this. I was pissed off because we're all lumped together. The New York Times is a very large publication with tons of readers. And these people may not know what a Cummins or a Duramax or Power Stroke is. They might not know the difference between a VP44 and a CP3 pump. They probably have no idea. So their first glimpse into the community and the industry that we all love and we're passionate about is going to be this article. And after you read this article, it's not a good glimpse you get into this. And felt the need to respond. Not necessarily just for me, but because I know there's a lot of hardworking, passionate people out there that use these trucks to support their family, that they like to modify them. They like to take it to the track and do the drag race, sled pull. Maybe they like to do dyno competitions. Maybe they just like how it looks. And this is directly affecting them. And we have a voice. We have a way to respond to something like this. And that's what we're going to do. So today, Nick from Duramaxtuner is joining me. And we're going to talk about this article. And we're going to go through some of the things that were said in it. Whether they're right or they're wrong, we're going to talk about it. And we're also going to discuss, and this is really important, what Duramaxtuner is doing to harness their expertise and to keep the performance side going with these newer trucks, the ones that are saddled with these new restrictions, where in the past people said, you can't make power with it, you can't do anything with it, it sucks. Well, they're showing that that's not true, and we want to talk to them about it, see what they're doing with this LML, and some other platforms they're going to try this with. So let's get right into the podcast.
We're really excited to have you on the Diesel Power Podcast today. It's not every week that a huge publication like the New York Times talks about the diesel industry, but
that's a rarity.
It is. I saw that and I thought, well, I've seen a lot, but that's not something that's very common. But you guys did a podcast on it recently.
We did.
I think it's starting to, go through social media and the diesel community where they're hearing about it, but they might not know what the article said. And we wanted to give everyone a little bit of background and get what were the main points you pulled from this article when you sat back and read it?
Yeah, the article was pretty basic in my opinion. Not a whole lot of meat there. Really, what it boils down, what she came through with in the article is what is coal rolling. Kind of talking about it, who it affects, so who does it, who it affects, motorcyclists, other motorists, guys in diesel trucks with stacks, and then kind of what the law enforcement, state and local government are doing to combat it, so imposing fines, what states are adopting that, how that progression is looking, kind of how police officers are policing it, so what they're, how they're learning about opacity, how much smoke is too much smoke, and then who they're going after and how they're going after them. And then the article took an interesting turn, and it went to what it considered the roots of coal rolling, which are the sled pulling organizations, so the competitive diesel atmosphere, right? And it tried to make some connection there, but in my opinion, it didn't work so hot, but it tried to make a connection there between the coal rolling that we see on the street that's more or less a nuisance. I think most of us can agree. And then, between that and competitive sled pulling. And then we got a quick mention with the clean sweep at the end of the article. So that's my 30-second recap.
When I read it, I was actually quite shocked just to see such a large publication. I don't know if they're the largest, but I'd assume they're probably one of the largest, media organizations or, out there. And for them to focus,
we got that much attention.
Yeah, for them to focus.
Somebody's causing enough ruckus that, and the article had a big slant on it. I think, anybody who reads it, it's about rebellion. The question is blowing black smoke, a rebellious activity, and is it solving anything?
That's the question I came away asking, not necessarily for myself, but is that rebellion? Is that why people do it? Is that why it's on the radar of a lot of people out there?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Patrick. I'm sure there's a small percentage of people who do it out of rebellion, right? So there's especially targeted acts, like if you see a bicyclist on the side of the road and you blow smoke on them in front of a police officer. Well, I would say that's a fairly rebellious act, and that's this is bogus, right? Like, who does that? But yeah, there's also an element of guys who are using their trucks for fun, or who are towing an extra heavy load, or who run a high horsepower truck, and that's just the day-to-day. Sometimes it blows black smoke, and that's a little different crowd.
And the thing that caught me about it was, there is a segment, I believe, that does do what was described in this article. Now, I can't imagine somebody doing that to a police officer, which is what the article mentioned. But, yeah. I think it's a percentage. However, I find that the majority of diesel enthusiasts, of shop owners, of businesses, of everyone else, that's not even on the radar. Yeah, or it's not even identified as a sense of... Yeah, just being lumped into it. But also on the flip side, there's also, I think, in the diesel industry, or having a diesel truck, we're in a niche. They're not the most common vehicles on the road. And there's a sense of independence, I think, that comes from owning one. And it's really tough to have these amazing trucks. You got, great economy for what they, how much they weighed and the power that they made. And then all of a sudden, it's the emissions restrictions come on it, especially, like mid 07.5, 08s, 09s. They come on, and the trucks suffer from some issues. I had one. I went through a bunch of O2 sensors and a DPF and everything else, and it was replaced under warranty, whereas, we look back and we say, well, these trucks didn't have this, and they were great. And I don't know, it's just it's very murky right now.
Yeah. There's a compromise, and I think owners have to understand that. You're talking about a vehicle that's very capable, gives you a sense of independence, draws a crowd of drivers that I think we can all agree are independent, strong-minded, strong-willed people, right? Like freedom, right?
Right. Freedom.
There's a reason I drive a truck like this. Okay. So, when the EPA or when the government comes down and imposes some regulations, anything that changes the status quo is always going to shake things up. But amongst the crowd, like we just described, you're going to get some serious feedback, some serious pushback on that. And I don't think what happened in 2007.5 to 2010, like you said, with the DPF and with emissions regs coming down, harder on these trucks, I don't think it's a big surprise that we got the pushback that we did. And maybe the coal rolling is part of that, but I think for the most part, a large percentage of diesel owners fall somewhere in the middle. You know what I mean? They're not going to go out and roll a bunch of black smoke to protest this, because really, what does that solve? But they're also fearful about what do emissions mean for my sport, for my truck, for my future in hauling or towing, or what I use my truck for.
that leads, I think, to the bigger question, and I think what, you're one of the elder statesmen of diesel performance and what you guys do is, as a diesel community and as truck owners and everything, are we allowing the conversation to be set elsewhere, being more reactive instead of proactive to it?
Personally, I think so. I think the diesel community in general has a short-sighted view of the future, and it's sad to watch guys blow smoke and do a bunch of that shit when you know what it does to the industry. You know what a bad name it gives. You know what it represents. Right? It represents the death of the industry. So many people see that, and they tie that back to us, and then the regs get stronger, the rules get rougher, and eventually it starts to affect even more those of us who don't do that. So that's tough to see. But to answer your point, I think we're having rules imposed on us, and we're reacting. And I think it's time to turn around and look forward a little bit.
I do too. The one part of that article that hit me the hardest was, in the diesel community, we think that these regulations are just in California, or maybe a little bit on the East Coast.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect me. I don't fall under it. And then you see states like, they mentioned Illinois, they mentioned Colorado, they mentioned other ones where they want or have tried to pass the laws where you can get a $5,000 ticket or whatever dollar amount they want to attach to it for the opacity being more than 40% or 50% or whatever it is.
Sure, yeah.
It's not just on one coast or the other.
No, that's a perfect point, man. It is not regionally specific in the long term. Maybe it is right now. Maybe right now you're not affected. Maybe you're in an area where there's no emissions testing and your buddy's a cop who doesn't give a shit, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not forever. I don't know how long you plan on driving a diesel truck. If it's 10 years, 20 years, or you plan on the federal government cracking down on you hard enough in the next 2 years, you got to get all the smoke out of your system right now. But if you look forward, you understand that stuff's on the horizon. It's coming down the pipe. You will be affected by it.
I keep waiting for that moment when I'd say it's probably like it was in the unleaded industry where
catalytic converter. Yeah, exactly.
And these cars that make great power, and then all of a sudden it's cut in half. Well, now there's 500, 600, 700 horsepower factory cars, and those guys don't have to go through this.
That's a great case study. I'm glad you brought that up because the catalytic converter, it's almost identical to what happened in the diesel industry. Test pipes, emissions regs. I mean, the whole thing just, the crackdown, the pushback from the performance market. And like you said, now, I mean, is it even an issue? I mean, you can get a 650 horsepower Corvette, a 707 horsepower Hellcat. I mean, they all have catalytic converters on them. You can clearly make power through emissions equipment, and that's driven by the customers. I mean, customers want that power, and we're seeing GM and Ford and Dodge react to that in the diesel performance market. I mean, what you probably know better than I do. What's the new, the latest horsepower on a Ford was that like 440, 450. GM's up there too. I mean, the emissions equipment keeps getting better and better. And there's going to be a switchover. There's going to be an adoption point where there's going to be a quick slide, and people realize that you can make a lot of power through emissions equipment. And that's really what my business is about, accelerating.
Well, and that perfectly leads into how the New York Times brought you guys into this with Clean Sweep, which I know most people know about the truck, but if you could tell us a little bit about the truck and what you guys are doing with it, I think that would tie this together.
Yeah. The truck is a pretty basic entry into the sled pulling arena. So it's a 2012 GMC with a Duramax in it. It's set up with one of our Stealth 64 turbochargers. I've tuned the truck. It has an extra high-pressure fuel pump and a built transmission, and then some suspension upgrades to allow it to be competitive in sled pulling. And really our goal with the truck was really to show that you can be competitive in a street class sled pulling arena and go and have fun with the truck every week and still have it be emissions equipped, still drive it on the street, still essentially fly under the radar legally. So not draw any red flags to yourself legally.
What's really cool about that, I'm sure you remember, like when these DPFs first came on the trucks, and there'd be ads or things where people would say, well, if you add this much power to it, your DPF turns into this rock, and they'd cut it open and it's all clogged, And to see, I mean, this thing's way more than 100 horsepower stock, so.
Yeah. I mean, the truck is 620 horsepower. I love those things, right? Because I always read that stuff or I see it on the forums, and it's like, where is the data? Show me the data. I want to see where somebody failed one doing this. You know what I mean? And really what it boiled down to is all speculation, and that's what we were seeing on our Facebook page. We tune a lot of emissions-equipped trucks, and we were saying, but how does it perform? If you sled pulled with that truck, it'd be, same like you said, the DPF would be shelled in 2 passes. Okay, maybe you're right, maybe you're not. I mean, one way to find out, right? So let's take it to the track and beat the hell out of it and see what happens. And we got nearly 20 hooks on this DPF, and it still regens down to 0, comes back up to 12. Does everything that the truck did before we started pounding on it this year. So I don't think I don't think the data supports their hypothesis.
And I think this is really the first. I can't think of any other truck that's tried to do this. So it was all just speculation. It's going to clog, you're going to melt.
I mean, I don't think it's reasonable to expect sled pullers to adopt DPFs. That's not what we're trying to do here, and I want to be really clear about that, because a lot of sled pullers watch the videos and they say, why the hell would you do that? Why, the smoke and the sound and the the tenacity of the truck, that's all part of the sport. You can't take that away. You can't neuter the truck, and really that's not what it's about. It's about showing that you can do both if you want to. The opportunity is there, right? It's just about widening the perspective a little bit.
Right. I mean, it could be drag racing. It could be
exactly. It could be drag racing. Yeah.
that part in the article where they were talking to people who said they love the smoke and that's why they go to sled pulls and everything. And
yeah,
I'm not incredibly into sled pulling. I appreciate it, but I haven't been around it a lot. But what I do know is I've never seen those guys get excited because they went 15 feet and had a whole bunch of smoke. Like, they just wanted to pull it as far as they could and win. And I think that's what people like to see.
Yeah. Do you go anywhere to watch smoke and noise? Like, I don't go anywhere for that, right? I mean, the slinging, the tires spinning, the truck moving, the parts breaking. Like, I feel like that, the footage. I mean, if you go and ask a sled puller, what is your goal with this truck tonight? To win, right? To pull the furthest. That is the goal. So it's funny to me that the smoke and noise, that it's tied that closely, in the hearts and minds, I guess. But,
on the drag racing side, maybe it's a little different, but it's like a lot of the trucks now, if they're common rail, they don't necessarily have a lot of that. Like, they will when they're, staging and getting up to the tree and everything. But once it takes off, they're pretty clean going down the track. And that's what I contrasted that statement in the article with, is it doesn't fill the stands for them staging. They want to see the times. They want to see how fast they go.
Right, exactly. And I think people will realize that. And the only way to show them that is to show them the time slip, right? Show them the mile an hour. Show them the footage. Just keep coming back with the results. If you can show the results, they'll speak. And different things will be associated with the sport, but it'll be just as fun. To take it off the track, you talk about your drag race guy going down the track nice and clean. Imagine driving that same truck on the street, right? Like, I don't know about you, but when I'm beating on my truck, I don't appreciate having a giant black plume behind me that lets everybody know what I'm up to.
Right.
I'm a stealth guy. I like it to be quiet. I like it to be fast, and I don't want to broadcast it. If I wanted to put a whip flag on the back of the truck and let everybody know where I was, I'd do that. Yeah.
Well, a question just came to my mind as far as with Clean Sweep is, say people are listening to this and they're seeing what you guys are doing, listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
They go, okay, I want to do this. How, as far as the motor itself, because I think one of the perceptions too is, well, when you have a DPF on the truck, the EGTs are incredibly high, you're going to melt the piston, it's a ticking time bomb. Is that the kind of data and feedback you guys are seeing? Or
I can speak to that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely concern there. It's a system that you have to learn, Patrick. It's not a straight pipe, so you got a lot going on in the catalytic system. What I would say is if someone's interested in doing this, they need to start by understanding what the system does and how it works on a stock truck. So buy yourself a good gauge set, Edge CTS, something like that. Put it on the truck and watch EGTs throughout the exhaust system. Most of these trucks have 4 or 5 exhaust gas temperatures in them, stock. So you can watch what happens, along the exhaust system as you drive it, and you get a really good feeling for, what happens normally, what happens during catalytic warm-up mode, what happens during active regen, what happens while towing, and there's a lot to learn there. And once you get a feel for that, you can understand where the hot EGTs are, under what scenarios you need to be careful, and kind of know what you're doing a little more. And then as you take that to the competitive range, your question is, does it run hotter? Is it harder on the engine? I'd be lying if I tell you it wasn't. You have a filter in the exhaust system that has, 2 extra PSI of differential pressure across it. So you have a little bit higher pressure in the exhaust system. Pressure and heat are directly tied together. Anytime you raise pressure in an exhaust, you're going to raise heat. If you've been around this sport, you should know that. Typically, 100 degrees exhaust gas temperature would be, for an adequately sized DPF, I would say 100 degrees higher in the manifold would be expected. So if you're seeing 1450 with a straight pipe, see 1550 now. It just means you need more compressor wheel, more turbocharger. You need to be tighter on the tune-up. It all plays in.
Gotcha. Now, do you guys think, with this truck, do you think you found the limit of what you can do, or do you think there's still more that can be had out of a emissions-equipped truck?
Yeah, well, you heard what I said earlier, right? If you don't have the data on it, you don't know.
Right.
This truck is at 620 rear wheel horsepower right now. 2 or 3 years ago, I built a twin turbocharged 2011 LML that had twins on it, and we ran it at 640 horsepower for a couple of years before I sold it. Back then, I thought that was the limit of the DPF. And in subsequent years, I've learned a lot about how these systems work. I'm still learning every day. So I think there's more in it. I think the telltale is going to be the differential pressure across the DPF. As we start to get into that 4 to 5 PSI range, I think we're going to start to understand that it's just diminishing returns at that point. In the near future, we're working with Jason Worley and WC Fab to put together another go at this twin turbo stuff on the LML. The guys at Diesel Tech Magazine, Austin and Matt, the guy who's putting the truck up, are they want to know what the limits are. They asked the same question you just did. So can we do 750 horsepower? And that that gave me a little bit of pause. I would like to start at 650 again and push the truck. And we mapped a set of injectors very precisely to help us get there. And our goal is to very accurately calibrate the truck to 700 horsepower and see if we can control EGTs and control the emission system completely through that range. So I'm excited for that.
That is really cool. And I do, this is somewhat of a loaded question as well, but being a Cummins guy, do you guys have any plans to try this on a 6.7 Cummins?
Dude, I thought you'd never ask. No, I have a 2015 6.7 Cummins. I love the truck. Got another 500 horsepower emissions equipped truck. As you know as well as I do, the 68 on those trucks gives you a little bit more of a than the Allison does. I think the Cummins emission system and the layout of the engine, just the simplicity of it, really lends itself to a twin turbocharged setup. I know Clint at ATS has been working on one for a while. I've worked with him on tuning it a little bit. I would like to get a twin turbo setup on my own truck, but first I'd like to do a single turbocharged like our Stealth setup, like a Stealth 64 upgrade on that truck to see if we can get 600 horsepower reliably, which I think should be no problem, and then push towards that 700 mark. But I think the potential is there on both platforms. Maybe even a Ford, I don't know. but the Cummins, certainly the architecture and layout of the powertrain lends itself to that a lot more easily than the LML.
Yeah, I think the tough part is the transmission. I mean, especially the new Allisons and the 6R140s, is there's so much that can be had with transmission tuning on them that the 68 doesn't have.
Yeah.
But
they're just monsters. You know what I mean? They work really well. I'm not as versed in the 6R140, but the Allison is, idiot-proof to 800 horsepower when you build it. Certainly, you can go higher than that. But for what we're talking about, you're never going to have an issue with one. Doing a mild build on it.
I look forward to seeing that, and I think I speak for a lot of enthusiasts and people out there that we appreciate what you guys are doing with this and kind of jumping into the unknown and doing something
fun,
that hasn't
been
been done.
It's a challenge. You got to continually challenge yourself, otherwise, life gets boring. So, we're going to see if we can maintain air-fuel ratio and lead this truck with air and try and keep it as clean as we can. And, we'll post it up on our Facebook page and make videos about it. And happy to talk about it on your podcast and on our podcast. And, I think it's the way of the future. Once you drive one of these trucks, it's a really cool experience. It's just something you need to feel, you know what I mean? The sound of the turbo, no smoke, and just a silent torque. You know what I mean? It's really cool.
Yep. Well, that's awesome. We thank you for being on the podcast today and shedding some light on this article and what you guys are doing, and I think some bigger things in the diesel industry community that haven't really been touched on yet, but they're coming up pretty quick.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to remember that the clean movement is not just on emissions-equipped stuff. That guys with 2001, 2006 trucks, older trucks, there's a lot of new parts and new tuning methods and new software that's on the market that if you want to build a clean truck, you can build a clean truck. It doesn't have to have a DPF on it. It can be a pre-emissions truck. But, keep that in mind as you're building a high horsepower truck that, clean usually means responsive, means quick spooling, high torque. And that's a lot of fun to drive on the street. So I would encourage you guys to keep that in the front of their mind as they're speccing parts for their build. It not only benefits them driving the truck, but the future of the sport as well.
And for any guys that listen and they're ready to go right now, they want to do it, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you guys and get some stuff headed that way?
Yeah. We got a sales force of 5 guys are on the phone all day long. They eat and breathe this stuff, 815-568-7920. Or they can go to Duramaxtuner.com or CalibratedPower.com, go on our Facebook pages. We're available. We're out there in space. If you search us, you will find us. And I really appreciate you having me on, Patrick. It's been a pleasure, and nice outline, nice line of questions. I've done a few of these podcasts, and it's been great talking with you. Great host.